So what functions do skeletal muscle tissues perform? They move the body, maintain posture, protect and support, regulate elimination of materials, and produce heat. Second one, epimysium is a layer of dense, irregular connective tissue that surrounds the whole skeletal muscle. Paramysium is a layer of dense, irregular connective tissue around each fascicle. Endomysium is a layer of areolar connective tissue that surrounds each muscle fiber. Okay, 3, what cells fuse? Okay, it's the myoblasts fuse. During the fusion process, each myoblast nucleus contributes to the eventual number of nuclei in the fiber. Consequently, skeletal muscle fibers are multinucleated. What are satellite cells? Satellite cells, adult stem cells. Satellite cells are adult stem cells. Satellite cells are myoblasts that do not go on to form the skeletal muscle fiber. Said satellite cells or myosatellite cells remain within the postnatal skeletal muscle tissue and assist in muscle repair. Okay, what is a motor end plate? It's a specialized region of sarcolemma with numerous folds containing ACH receptors. What are T-tubules or transverse? They're deep invaginations of sarcolemma, extend into skeletal muscle fiber as a network of narrow membranous tubules to sarcoplasmic reticulum. T-tubule membrane contains voltage-sensitive Ca2 plus channels. So what is sarcoplasm? It's a cytoplasm or muscle of the muscle cell. It has organelles. What's sarcolemma? It's the plasma membrane of the skeletal muscle fiber. What are thick and thin filaments? They're types of myofilaments bundled within the myofibril. Thick is made up of 200 to 500 bundles of myosin protein molecules. Thin is composed of actin, trypomyosin, and troponin proteins. So what is the sarcoplasmic reticulum? It's the endoplasmic reticulum found in muscle cells. It surrounds myofibril, and it stores calcium ions required for contraction. What is the terminal cisterna? It's part of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It looks like blind sacs, contains Ca2 plus, and it contains Ca2 plus release channels. What are sarcomeres? They're repentant units of myofilaments. They're responsible for muscle contraction. What's a triad? 2 terminal cisterna and a T-tubule. Okay, no other components of a sarcomere, including the thick and thin filaments and all the contractile. So what is actin? It's a contractile protein forming the major part of the thin filament in a sarcomere. What is troponin? A globular ball-like protein attached to tropomyosin. Troponin contains the binding site for Ca2+. What is tropomyosin? It's a short, thin, twisted filament that is string-like protein, covers small regions of the actin strands, including the myosin binding sites in a non-contracting muscle. What is myosin? It's a protein that converts chemical energy in the form of ATP to mechanical energy. What is titin? Protein responsible for passive elasticity of muscle, as well as the different. What is A? It's the dark region that contains thick filaments and overlapping thin filaments, contains H zone and M line. It's also the central region. What is the I? It's a light bands that only contain thin filaments. It can disappear with maximal muscle contraction. What is H? It's the central portion of A band containing only thick filaments. It disappears with muscle contraction. What are Z discs? They separate one sarcomere from the next, responsible for anchoring thin filaments. What are M lines? Thin protein meshwork structure in the center of the H zone, responsible for attaching and keeping thick filaments aligned during contraction. Okay, how does morphology? During contraction, the H zones disappears, the I band narrows in width, and may disappear, and the Z discs in each sarcomere move closer together. The sliding filament theory just describes muscle contraction. Other components of neuromuscular junction, including synaptic knobs, synaptic cleft, and motor end plate. So neuromuscular junction is the specific location, usually in the mid-region of the skeletal muscle fiber, where it is innervated by a motor neuron. Synaptic knob is an expanded tip of an axon, where the axon nears the sarcolemma of a muscle fiber. The synaptic knob enlarges and flattens to cover a relatively large surface area of sarcolemma. Contains synaptic vesicles, ACH, which is acetylcholine, and Ca2 plus pumps, and voltage-gated Ca2 plus channels. It's a motor end plate. It's a specialized region of the sarcolemma of a skeletal muscle fiber. It contains ACH receptors. Binding of an ACH opens these channels, allowing Na plus entry into the muscle fiber and K plus to exit. Now the 3 major general steps of skeletal muscle contraction. So the first one is neuromuscular junction, which is the release of ACH from synaptic vesicles, which excites the skeletal muscle fiber. The second one is excitation contraction coupling, which is when ACH binding triggers propagation of an action potential along the sarcolemma and the T2 to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, which is stimulated to release CA2+. The third one is cross-bridge cycling, which is sarcomeres short and the skeletal muscle fibers contract. Next question. Now in detail the steps that occur at the neuromuscular junction, all the important proteins involved. So the first step is CA2+ entry at the synaptic knob, parentheses nerve signals, triggers the opening of voltage-gated CA2+ channels. The second step is release of ACH from synaptic knob, and the third step is binding of ACH to ACH receptor at the motor end plate. Second question, know in detail the steps what occur in the EC coupling beginning with the generation. Already did that. So know in detail the steps involved in cross-bridge cycling. There's 4 steps. First one is cross-bridge formation, which is the myosin heads bind to myosin binding sites of actin. The second one is power stroke, sarcomeres shortening. Myosin head swivels and does power stroke. ADP and P are released during the process. Third one is release of myosin heads. ATP binds with the ATP binding site of myosin head, which releases myosin head. The fourth one is resetting of myosin head, which is myosin ATP splits ATP and ADP into P. Okay, what is muscle tension? It's the force generated when a skeletal muscle is stimulated to contract. What are the factors? There's 4. There's fast glycolytic fibers, large motor units, greater stimulus frequency, and muscle at resting length. What is a muscle twitch? A single brief contraction period and then relaxation period of a skeletal muscle in response to a single stimulation. What is the latent period? There's 3 periods. So the first one's a latent period. It occurs after stimulus is applied but before the contraction of the skeletal muscle fiber begins. No change in fiber length. CA2+ released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum into the cytosol. The second one is contraction period, which is the power strokes pull the thin filaments past the thick filaments. The third one is relaxation period, which begins with the release of cross bridges that CA2+ is returned to its storage within the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, what is wave summation? It's a summation of contractile forces as the effect of each new wave is added to the previous wave. What is incomplete tetany? This further increases stimulation frequency, allows less time for relaxation between contraction cycles. What is complete tetany? Its stimulation frequency is further increased until ultimately the contractions of the skeletal muscle fiber fuse and form a continuous contraction that lacks any relaxation. This continuous contraction is called tetany. If stimulation occurs in the muscle, which is fatigue. Okay, what is a motor unit? A motor unit is a motor neuron and all the skeletal muscle fibers it innervates, composed of synaptic knob, neuromuscular junction, skeletal muscle fibers, axon of motor neuron, and striations. Okay, what is the phenomenon of recruitment? It's basically all or nothing.